This is Joshua-Michéle Ross of O'Reilly Media, live at Fast Forward '09. I'm here with Charlene Lee. Hi.
Hi there.
And last time we saw each other was at Web 2.0 Expo in San Francisco in March. Your book, Groundswell, had just come out, which for me was kind of the first real field guide for professionals and executives trying to deal with social technologies, blogs, wikis, widgets, RSS, and really put them into action. I wanted to kind of fast forward to now. There's been an eventful year, including kind of an economic crisis and things like that. What's the state of social technologies right now?
Well, I think, again, there's a tremendous amount of interest, which is part of the reason why we wrote the book. And people are curious about what it can do, also very threatened by it. So I think the state now is that a lot more people are using it. And so companies that were comfortable sort of hanging out in the background or on the sidelines are suddenly realizing, these are my core constituencies who are in it. It's not only just the millennials and the young adults, but people like you and me are on these things and using them and reading blogs and commenting and tweeting back and forth. So goodness, certainly be in there.
Right.
So I think a lot more people are jumping in, experimenting, and finding it hard, really hard to do.
Yeah. And it is hard to do because it represents a real diametric shift from the way that they used to behave as a company from a more of a business framework into a social framework. Is that right?
Right. And I think, again, it's not the technologies that are hard, but the mindset. And so some of the research I'm doing right now is why is it that some companies can do this and others really find it very hard? And there are multiple factors to who's actually engaged in it, how much the leadership believes in it, to even just how open the culture is. So I think, again, it's about letting go of that control, that fallacy of control is what I like to think about it, that you are in control of the message or the relationship. You're not.
Yeah.
And so the sooner you come to grips with that, the sooner you can get active with the groundswell.
Right. And I was fortunate enough to work with Best Buy for a while last year, and they had I thought they had an ideal kind of culture that was kind of led by kind of enlightened leadership, if you want, that allowed people to be very entrepreneurial around these things and test and do things. Is that what you're finding in some of your research? Is that it's a very, very keyed into leadership and how
it's partly about the leadership, but it's also about I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay. It's also about but how they deal with failure. And so people say, well, maybe it's an innovative culture, it's all these things, but it's really about, can you take a risk? And will you be rewarded for taking that risk? And it's okay to make mistakes along the way, because when it comes to social media, it is really difficult to do it right all the time.
Right.
So you will fail, you will make mistakes. And so how does an organization deal with failure, I think, has a lot to do with how successful they can be with social media.
I was speaking with Clay Shirky yesterday, and he was saying, organizations look at this as likelihood of failure times cost, and they try and reduce the likelihood of failure, and they're desperate to try and do that when they really need to be opening up and saying it's okay to fail. And the cost of these experiments has gone down in terms of social technology. You can test an experiment at very low cost.
Right. And it's not so much the cost of the test, it's the cost of the risk. And so if you assess how risky something is, and I can mitigate the risk, but also have contingency plans. So some of the exercises I do with companies is I will sit down and say, what are the 5, 10 worst case scenarios you can have? Really, what's the worst thing that can happen? And it typically has everything to do with my employees doing something they shouldn't be doing.
Right.
That's pretty easy to control because they're your employees.
Right.
So that's training. I mean, you really go through with a list of what it is that you're afraid of, and you go through and say, really, how big is that risk? How important is it that I control that risk? How much am I willing to invest in mitigation of that risk versus the tremendous benefit that's on the other side.
Right.
And the other side of it is that all the times people don't have personal experiences with these social technologies. They don't understand the power of it, and so they don't understand the benefit to the organization.
So let me segue a little bit into search, which is the subject of Fast Forward '09, and how social technologies are both making search more important, but also changing the nature of search and find.
Sure. What I'm going to talk about today a little bit is about how social technologies are changing how people are searching. Because it's no longer enough to just have 10 blue links on a page. Because that's really very much driven by an algorithm. And frankly, why should you and I have exactly the same search results? It should be much more personalized to what we're looking for and how we're looking for things. And how do you get that? It's not the semantics of a page, but it's a combination of what I've searched for in the past, but also what have other people searched for in the past, using that same sort of context. It's also search placed in the context of everything else that you do, so no search stands on its own. So if you're a site and you're looking at a site search, think about all the things that people are looking for on that site. What are the most popular things? Not in terms of the links or things coming into that, but also in terms of usage, buying, so many other inputs into this. But also people who've bought these kinds of things like you, what do they search for?
Right.
So lots of different directions that you can go into in terms of using all that data, all that social and personal data to inform search.
And I've also, one of the things I heard, at the conference was, looking at the web as a platform, that it is about content on your site, but there's also this possibility of content from everywhere. It's portable. It's the web. So there may be, these cases where some of the content surrounding a result is not necessarily from your site, but it's value added to your customer or constituent.
And the example I have is book search. So if I'm thinking of buying a book on Amazon, which is where I typically buy my books, I want to see all the reviews from people, but not just the people on Amazon. I want to see the reviews from my friends who have written it on blogs, who have written it on Safari, for example, books I read.
Right.
So many different places where they put those reviews. And they're relevant to me because I know them.
Right.
And yet they're not on Amazon because that's not where they write the reviews.
Right.
And so it's about taking Amazon and putting it there, which you can do through affiliates, but also taking that content and putting it on Amazon. So there's a lot of things that I would like to be able to do with my friends. And this whole concept of social networks will be like air, that my friends will be wherever I am.
Right.
And I can take them and I can be wherever my friends
But
need me to be.
when you use that as a central organizing principle, I think you get to the heart of what you're saying earlier with a lot of concern or fear, because that's not the normal business model that businesses have.
Right. It's all about they're mine, my
Right.
customers,
Right.
versus here's my customer, what do they need from me? And what are the points where it makes sense for me to be with them, no matter where they are? Why would you invite your friends only to come over to your house? No, and not reciprocate by going to where they are. You would go to where they are too. So I think of this again as a relationship of your customers. If your customers need you, why wouldn't you be there for them, wherever that might be? Could be Facebook, could be MySpace, could be your own site, doesn't matter.
Right. This is where I look at some of the language around these phenomenon, and the social piece of it, that word, has a deeper connection into when you're social, you're abiding by a different contract than you are when you're in business necessarily. That business is generally a legal-based kind of framework, whereas social is about social relations. I notice a lot of the analogies you use is, look, if I'm at a cocktail party, I don't just interrupt, I listen first. I've heard you say that. And now, the idea of I reciprocate by going to your house. These are social kinds of things that people actually natively understand, but companies don't have in their, structurally, they're not used to.
But they do, though. They do. Go and talk to any salesperson. And they understand this innately about giving and taking, developing a relationship.
Right.
You don't walk in and say, buy my product, please. Please, it would be really good for you. They say, what are your needs? How can I help you? And that's the kind of relationship that salespeople naturally have. So companies do have these relationships.
Right.
They have it when they're recruiting, when they're talking, when they're actually talking to people. Marketing departments typically don't talk to people. They market to them. They message to them. And they have to relearn that and say, how do I really have a conversation?
Right. Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate it. That's a great note to close out on. I'm looking forward to hearing you in another hour, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.